It's not all positive for Collingwood this evening. The Herald Sun has published an article this afternoon centred around allegations involving the CEO, Craig Kelly. What do you know at this stage?
Oh, well, they're serious allegations, but we've got to stress that they're absolutely allegations. Collingwood have put out a press statement, which you'll get to in a second, or we can get to it very, very soon. The allegations are by a former employee, and they're pretty serious allegations. There's a quadrilla of shame if they are true. It involves racism on Indigenous players, Jewish person, Asian. There's a gay element in there as well. So they're very serious allegations. But Collingwood has stressed tonight that they've investigated those allegations previously. They've had an external expert to come in and have a look at the allegations, and they were unfounded. And they sent it on that man there, Craig Kelly, as CEO. And Victoria Police were also alerted to him, and they found nothing to do with it. That is in the Collingwood statement released tonight. But the aggrieved party has he's launched proceedings in court where the allegations have been aired.
Mm-hmm. So this was a former staff member who was employed by Collingwood for a period of 6 months. Let's get to that statement, which was released roughly 10 minutes ago now, and it does say that Collingwood is aware of these allegations made by a former staff member. It goes on to say that we take all matters raised seriously, and when the former staff member raised matters internally in March this year, the club looked into those concerns in line with our organisation's workplace policies and procedures. In addition to the internal processes which took place, an external expert was engaged to review the findings. Both processes found no breach of workplace law. So it goes on to say, as you just touched on, that further details about Victoria Police and the Fair Work Commission being alerted to the matter. It concludes by saying, while it is unfortunate this situation has not been resolved, the club believes that it has acted lawfully and intends to defend the matter. So over to the courts now. Yeah,
it is. And the AFL, absolutely, they were aware of it. It was brought to the AFL's attention. They, I think, passed it on to Victoria Police. There was no case to answer. And that's not to say they haven't got a case to answer. The court will decide that in due time.
I think recent history has reminded us all, though, that it is important to remember at this stage that they are allegations, as you say, and they're allegations of such nature which belong in court, and that's where they'll be dealt with. So
yes, they will, Kath.
Now, in court documents filed on Monday, Kelly is accused of making some serious racial slurs by the club's former head of First Nations strategy, Mr Mark Cleaver. Now, Mr Cleaver is seeking compensation for the hurt, humiliation, distress and economic loss. We stress at this stage that these are just allegations at the moment. But, Sammy, Collingwood has responded. It did so quite recently, and it's standing by Craig Kelly at the moment. He is not standing down.
No, he's not, Jay. Collingwood's put out its statement tonight. They have strenuously denied these allegations. They have said that when the former staff member raised matters internally in March this year, both the club looked into these concerns in line with the organisation's workplace policies and procedures. In addition to the internal process that took place, an external expert was engaged to review the findings. Both processes found there was no breach of workplace law. So that's pretty emphatic, and they've gone on to say that the club believes it has acted lawfully and intends to defend the matter. Also important to note that the former staff member, he made the further allegations to Victoria Police. They examined them and they determined not to take any further action as well. I think what we learnt from Hawthorn is really important, and that is that due process is important to follow. It looks like we'll get that this time around, given this will be tested properly through the courts. So that's really important. You do wonder, though, about Collingwood. I mean, does a cloud hang over them now? Craig Kelly will continue in that role. What is the environment going to be like for the players right now? We heard Jeremy Howe just right then on AFL 360. He said the timing's not ideal. Obviously, Scott Pendlebury has the biggest game of his life this weekend. He said that at their playing group, they're still not fully aware of the situation. So what's it going to be like going to work every day with Craig in the job? The captain, Darcy Moore, he's such a powerful leader. He's so big on diversity. Yep. You just wonder how the players are feeling tonight.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some serious conversations inside the Collingwood Football Club, because it was only in 2020 and 2021 when the Do Better report was released, where Collingwood, in its own words, described that the process with these sorts of allegations of racism must be treated incredibly seriously. So here's the report here. In 2021, Collingwood said, with any sort of complaints or allegations, in the past it says they have not been responded to in an effective manner. In fact, the club found that itself got defensive, it doubled down, it denied allegations instead of taking them seriously and responding to them in a proactive manner. It said the club in the past, in these situations, has gone into damage control, wanted to protect the brand, and as such, the aggrieved party, has not been happy. At the end, has not been heard, has not been listened to. So the recommendations from the 2021 Do Better report, it says, the process must include an avenue of external independent review and protection for whistleblowers. So they have got to be taken seriously and external people have to be brought in. It also says that there's got to be a framework that ensures there is accountability and consequences for acts of racism committed by members of the club. So there's no doubt the whole AFL world is watching what Collingwood is doing here and how it is responding. Importantly, in that statement that you've spoken about, Sam, it says that it has internally investigated the matter. It has engaged an external consultant. Victorian Police were involved. So there's 3 levels of scrutiny on this issue, but it does seem that we're off to the federal court, federal circuit and family court. There are no admissions of guilt here. You just wonder whether the club has really considered sort of standing Craig Kelly down in the short term. We've seen Alistair Clarkson, Chris Fagan be stood down. Jordan De Goey was stood down over the New York incident. That's not saying there's any admissions of guilt here. The club and Craig Kelly are defending these allegations very seriously. But to deal with this appropriately, the optics, to be really thorough, should he be stood down? I think it's an important conversation, and no doubt these sorts of talks will continue at Collingwood over the next couple of weeks. It is unfortunate, Barnesy, because we've got the great Scott Pendlebury playing his 400th game this week. Is there any chance, this sort of issue could overshadow one of the great milestones this week?
Yeah, well, Sam, you spoke about a cloud over the club already. We're going to find out about that tomorrow because Scott Pendlebury's having his 400-game press conference. They're going to get all the 400-game members in the AFL to come down there, and the media is going to ask about this. We know it's just allegations, but it's going to be asked about his CEO. It's going to be asked about things nothing to do with 400th game. This is the biggest milestone in the club's history. They've never had a player reach 400 games, and it's going to be completely overrun tomorrow by this, and probably all week.
I just wonder whether Scott, like Jeremy Howard says, I'm not answering questions, whether someone at the club says, first, we're not dealing with that, that's a matter for the club. Right here and now, we're celebrating the great Scott Pendlebury and his, incredible achievement in the game. The other issue, of course, is Graham Wright. Now, I think he's due back, is he not, at the club tomorrow, or certainly early in August. He's the highly respected football manager who's gone on a bit of a sabbatical, a holiday. We know he has aspirations to be a club CEO. You've been speaking to Collingwood President Jeff Brown recently. Where do you think Graham Wright sits in all this, Sam?
Well, it's fascinating because reading the tea leaves and having spoken to Jeff Brown last week, it sounded like Graham Wright wasn't coming back. Jeff said that he would have to fit in within the new football structure. They were really happy with how Brendan Bolton and Justin Lepage were going, running the football department. Brendan Bolton obviously more from the on-field point of view, Lepage heading up the list management side. So they're really happy with the structure in place, and he said that Wrighty would have to fall into the new structure. Now, if something was to change in terms of the CEO office, Wrighty's done that job before. He's been interim CEO before, so we weren't expecting him to come back, but you just wonder if the goalpost shift, maybe it could be a different story.
Oh, he could do the job. I think there's no doubt about that, whether it's Collingwood or any other club. I think he's one of the most respected and capable people in the AFL. So to be an interesting return for him. I wonder whether this storm at the moment maybe makes him consider holding back, staying away, letting that process play out, and maybe having some involvement with the club later on towards a trade period. That will all play out. Certainly a very serious issue. We stress those allegations at the moment.